schedule in Denver. LA sat out the loss last night as well to rest his sore right knee. He is expected to play in Sunday's All-Star game in LA. Unfortunately, missing their best players has been a theme for the Spurs most of the season. Turns out there's a price to pay. Last night in Salt Lake, the Spurs couldn't hold a late-game 8-point lead against the Jazz. They had only 11 turnovers, but that was a costly one. Then Donovan Mitchell with a bucket. A couple of late possessions were just not good. In San Antonio, Manu blocked there. They had a near turnover that led to a desperation Manu Ginobili three that nearly went in.
In classic Manu fashion,
but and give the Jazz credit, they've won 10 in a row. But this Spurs team is really challenged in terms of offensive execution right now.
Yeah, without Aldridge out, I mean, their last 10 games, Aldridge was averaging 22 points. Their next leading scorer in that situation scores 11 points a game.
Right.
It's really, really difficult when you don't have a go-to scorer. And what they really struggled with last night, they actually had a pretty good lead. And the Favors Mitchell pick and roll was eating them alive. They struggled defensively as well, which is also very uncharacteristic of the Spurs. But when you've got the kind of lineup changes they've had and you've had the kind of in and out of the rotation they've had, that happens.
Their leading scorer in uniform tonight will be Pau Gasol, who averages just under 11 points per game. They don't have any player on the roster averaging 4 assists or more right now. Granted, they play at a very slow pace to kind of mask some of their offensive deficiencies, but they're also relying, as Manu Ginobili said on Saturday night, on a roster that lacks talent right now, leaning heavily on second-year players. This is not Pop's preferred MO when you see guys like Bryn Forbes and DeJounte Murray, now a starter. Davis Bertans expected to carry the kinds of loads they are. It's a very atypical Spurs team.
Well, and in a typical season, you would hope that one of these two guys could emerge as being a tremendous eighth man. You really hate to think that they're going to have to be 5, 6, and 7,
right,
which is what they've had to be. You know, the Spurs were really, really high on Bertans when they first drafted him. He stayed in Europe for a couple years, had a couple ACL injuries as well. But he's got great size. He's got real versatility as a shooter. He knows how to play. These are really intriguing pieces, and all of them individually could be very good at some point in their careers.
Sure.
But when you're having to do it all together at once, it's really been an incredible coaching performance by Pop, and he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And also, somewhat surprised the Spurs didn't do something to augment the group at trade deadline. That's not what they want to do, but it's typically something that you need to do when you're in this situation.
And who knows, there's still some buyouts out there, buyouts that could potentially happen. I would expect they have to pick up somebody between now and the deadline for those players to be playoff eligible. They're in Denver tonight. The Nuggets, no surprise, are a home team that excels relative to their road success. They have the biggest disparity between home and road wins in the league, plus 14 in that regard. I say all that leading up to the fact that the Spurs have won 6 of their last 7 trips to the Mile High City.
Yeah, so the Spurs, if they're nothing else, they are excellence and execution all the time, no matter who's in the lineup. And again, the greatness of Pop is really evidenced in that. I think what happens with Denver, they're struggling a little bit in games they're supposed to be able to win. Young teams have a hard time flipping the switch and winning when it's time. I think they take certain things for granted. What's really interesting is San Antonio's been able to win in a place where the Mile High City is supposed to take it out of you from an older team perspective, and yet San Antonio overcomes that. So I think Denver really, because they're so young and can tend to be inconsistent, just takes it for granted that that's a win because they've got so many scheduled wins at home.
Right, right. Could see Devin Harris's first start as a Nugget tonight. He had 9 points in 22 minutes in the win in Phoenix over the weekend. Did you catch this? A fascinating exercise in trust and buy-in by Warriors coach Steve Kerr last night, who left the coaching up to his players by and large. Kerr let them handle shoot-around and film session in the morning and the X's and O's during huddles and a 46-point win over the Suns last night. Fascinating stuff. His explanation was pretty simple, that his players are sick and tired of hearing him talk.
Well, and it's those games that they need to win.
I have to coach my team. I told Jay afterwards, I said that, you know, people may make a big deal of it, and had nothing to do with being disrespectful. It had to do with me trying to reach my team. I have not reached them for the last month. They're tired of my voice. I'm tired of my voice. You know, it's been a long haul these last few years, and I wasn't reaching them, and we just figured it was probably a good night pull a trick out of the hat and do something different. I thought the players responded really well.
Steve was talking about his conversation with Jay Triano, the Suns coach, because there was some speculation that the Suns might be mad about this being shown up in some way.
So I think it actually works the complete opposite. These are the games that Golden State's been letting their guard down and really losing focus in. So it's exactly the kind of team that has been giving them trouble. So it makes perfect sense to me that he would try it for this game because he had to get their attention for this game. Typically, they play very well against the very best teams in the league, and they're focused at that point. So it made a lot of sense for him to do it here. And I think people are trying to make too much of the disrespect concept because he wouldn't do this to Pop. Well, he wouldn't have to do this to Pop because they'd be ready for the Spurs.
Right. And Jay Triano, for the record, by the way, said he had no problem with it at all. He understood what Steve Kerr was trying to do. Your old coach, Tyronn Lue, also weighed in on this strategy by Kerr last night.
Steve Kerr last night giving a clipboard over to all his players for the entire game. Did you catch that? What do you think of that? And have you ever thought about it?
My coach was talking about it today, but I wouldn't do that. They already said LeBron's coaching the team anyway, so if I give him a clipboard, it's really going to say it. So, no, I wouldn't do that.
He's right. People have been saying that for years, true or not.